coming up on the Lead Ministry Podcast.
And what we found was quality of care was going down. The kids were safe, but the rooms weren't being left clean. Kids were starting to mix with age groups that weren't theirs. I had one sending me texts saying, "Hey, is this kid allowed to have nuts?" when there's a huge sign at the front of the room that says free room. Oh, nobody can have nuts. And she's like, "Well, she's eating nuts." Like,
And now your host, Josh Denhart.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lead Ministry Podcast. My name is Josh Denhart. I'm grateful that you're here. I have a very special guest today, and what we're going to talk about, this is I'm going to call this a success story, right? It's not only a Lead Ministry success story, it actually is a Lead Ministry podcast success story, but also it is a Lead Ministry coaching success story. So we're gonna jump into that today. Hey, guess what? If you're listening to this and it's been any level of value to you, I would love for you to do several things. Number one, please subscribe. Click subscribe and have the podcast kind of come up on the regular for you. Number two, understand that we have a YouTube channel. If you are kind of a visually stimulated person, kind of like I am, I like to watch a conversation. I like to watch facial expressions. We have all of our podcasts it's a dual thing. You can listen to it, but you can also watch it. So you can listen to it on any of the podcasting platforms that are popular, whatever one you use, but also you can watch it on YouTube. In addition, understand that the podcast is really, in a sense, kind of like a primer. It's an entry point, and we have lots of resources that can truly take you deeper. We're going to talk about that pathway here in just a minute. So I want to introduce to you my special guest, Josh. Josh, give us a quick hello. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll kick this thing off.
yeah, hey, my name's Josh. I'm a church plant in Baltimore City. I've been here since 2022. Right now, I currently lead birth to fifth grade. For years, my specialty, I was known for being the preschool pastor.
Yes.
And that was my pastor. College studies and early childhood, all of that.
Yeah. I've kind of known you as the preschool guy. And what's so fun is that the kingdom of God is big enough. And sometimes we find ourselves in a place where we can super specialize, right? And it is a certain approach, knowing the cognitive abilities, the cognitive benchmarks that a particular crowd of people are at. That's really important to be able to minister to that particular crowd effectively. So that's kind of fun, man. You were able to specialize.
Yeah, I had gone from my first church. I was on staff. I was a church of 17,000, so huge church.
Huge.
Pretty big church there. Was at that church 10 years, met my wife there. Great work there. And then going from there to a church of 1,700, which is still a huge church.
That is a huge church.
Big church. And then moved from that to a church of 175.
Okay, this is too funny. Tenfold difference all the way down.
Yes, I'm scared at what's next. That's house church is next.
Church of 17, right?
Yeah, so, and as you kind of go down, you specialize less because there's less kids.
Of course.
So I went from having 300 preschoolers week in and week out to now 78 kids birth to fifth grade.
I love that. And that could be another podcast in and of itself, like the lessons that you've learned. What is different between a church of 17,000 to a church of 1,700 to a church of 170, those differences, but also what's the same. That could be a podcast that we could cut together. So we'll table that guy. But right now, what I want to do is give everybody kind of the history. So we knew each other in the children's ministry space. We, kind of connected at national conferences, super fun that way. But then you joined Lead Ministry and we're taking some of the courses. Tell us just a little bit about that.
Yeah, so first met you at Kids Matter years ago.
Yes.
And back then, you had just launched the Lead Ministry. Back then, it was called Lead Volunteers.
Right.
That was the first year that I found myself in a ministry lead job and found, okay, I just went from being a children's ministry staffer to now I'm the lead guy. And,
you're the director of the program.
Correct. And I really hadn't been trained. So the two things that I grasped and said, okay, I'm going to hold on to these things. They're going to train me well as Cat Academy.
Yes.
And volunteers.
Yes.
And both of those things really helped me build a successful by every measure.
That is super, super good. And so you joined Lead Volunteers and you kind of followed the framework that we have, and you found that to be positive. You found that to be successful. Not to mention, you were just a regular listener on the podcast. And every once in a while, you would give me a shout out through, in text or an email or through Facebook Messenger. And you'd say, wow, like, just so you know, this is working for me. And one of those things that worked for you was, or what kind of, was struck a chord with you was episode 37. And everybody out there, we're going to refer to this throughout our podcast today. Episode 37 was a big deal to you because, and by the way, everybody who's out there, I think you should go back and listen to this one. It's the title of it, I believe, is The Most Important Ministry in Your Church. And guess what? It's not your ministry. Really. The most important ministry is the core of the church. And then everything else is a support to the core of the church. And that struck a chord with you. And because you were experiencing some pains, right? And some of the pains that you were experiencing, of course, were you were being expected to provide childcare for everybody at the church. Speak to that briefly.
Yeah. So when I first came here, this was the first church that I came in to build this, as opposed to, hey, really large church, here's this built thing, go lead that.
Yes.
So yeah, when I first came here in 2022, this was a 4-year-old church plant.
It still needed all of the infrastructure to be built.
It really did. And even if there were things to hand me, which there really was not, this is a hard place to do church. And
yes.
It's a place most church plants don't stick. There's been several church plants that have tried in the neighborhood that we're in right now and have not stuck. And
so it's hard soil. It's a little bit of hard soil.
It is. And when I first came here, it was when we saw, okay, God really is doing a big work here.
Sure.
And we can see what this will be. And it was a bit scary to step into that because not only just moving to a whole new place, but my first week, I had 17 kids.
Yes.
And I had fundraised to come here because church plant. I had fundraised and said, okay, I'm going to come here and build this thing. And I'm going to be full time. And I talked them into letting me be full time. And
yes.
we had 17 kids.
Yes.
Oh, great. Wow. But one of the things that we found pretty quickly was that this church, as it grew, they were trying to find out, okay, as we program more and more,
yes,
how do we do childcare for those things? So as we now have small groups that have grown and we have kids in those groups, as we now have men's and women's nights, and as we now have a worship night,
okay,
all these things, what do you do for childcare for those?
Well, interestingly enough, let me jump in here. I think this is really, really, really important because often, well, in your case, you stepped into 2 different churches and they were already established. And you just stepped into the already raging river of the stream of ministry that was happening there. Now you jump in and like you guys are building the boat. This is groundbreaking first time stuff. And that's a different story. And so they started, I imagine, with the word and worship. Yeah. And that's what a church plant starts with. You don't start with an extraneous way out here women's ministry, an extraneous way out here men's ministry. That's not where you start. You start with the core.
That's right.
word and worship. And then as you grow and that becomes sustainable, then you go, okay, let's add on. You add another layer and you add whatever. But as time grows on, as those grow, women's ministry and men's ministry might need some support in order to function, because what you find really quick is people are like, I'll absolutely do that. What am I supposed to do with my kids? And so for some people, they're like, we'll find a babysitter. But other people are like, that's going to stop my show. And so the church leaders are like, okay, we don't want any show to be stopped. We want these people to be served. And so we're going to provide a support mechanism, i.e. childcare, in order to allow this person the freedom to come and be ministered to at a deeper level other than just Sunday morning.
That's right. And just from a service level, it makes sense that they have this full-time kids minister stepping in. Our childcare needs have been met. Josh is here.
Yes. And so they think in their mind, okay, great. This is how it's supposed to go. And then what did you run into then? Yeah,
so I was trying to do two things at the same time, which you can't do both of those things well. I can't even walk and drink coffee. I have to stop. So I was trying to build up what we call City Kids, which is our Sunday time. Trying to build that up, trying to structure that, systematize that, build all of the bones so that this thing can grow and grow well.
Sure.
And so that the kids are kept safe, and so that volunteers are loved on and stick around for a long time, all of those things.
I mean, in a sense, if I can interrupt, what you were doing is you were following the lead volunteers pre-scripted, just what to do, and it was working.
I sure was, yes. But then at the same time, trying to staff childcare. And what I had found was childcare was sucking the life out of City Kids.
Okay, speak to that. Why was that? I can answer it for you because I lived it multiple times. But tell our audience why the childcare thing was actually cannibalizing your Sunday mornings. Very important.
Yes. So think about this. You're on our volunteer team and you have the choice. Do you want to serve City Kids Sunday at 9 a.m. and you're not paid? That's a volunteer role. Or would you like to serve childcare once a month at 6 p.m. after church and you'll get paid? So there was this structure that we built that, okay, childcare is paid because that's outside of regular volunteer hour. Sunday's not. And what we had found is slowly volunteers started to think, well, I'm going to say yes to this more and more, kind of get some of that side job. And then they find themselves saying no to City Kids more. And this did not come from their heart being, okay, I'm going to go with the paid gig. No, first it just started out with, I'll do that once, I'll do that twice. And then as they do that more and more, that works out. Now we have childcare staffed, and now City Kids is struggling.
Okay, so the thing is it's not all of a sudden that these are money grubbing. No, it has nothing to do with that. What it was is that here's the thing. People are looking to you, Josh, and that what they're saying is, wow, I'm totally bought in. I'm behind you as a leader. You take care of me as a leader. How can I help move the mission forward? And you say Sunday mornings, and they're like, absolutely, full on. What do you need? And then all of a sudden, before too long, as the church grew, you are now tasked with a new thing. And it's like, okay, I've got Sunday mornings, but I also have this childcare piece to serve women's and men's ministry and other things. And so then you throw it out to people and you're like, hey, I also have needs over here. And they're like, we love you, Josh. We'll do whatever it takes. And so, but there's only so much of them.
Right.
They can only give so much of their time. And so now, given that they have a discrete amount of time that they're willing to give, they're going to make choices. And some people chose over here, some people chose over here, but your church didn't have a large enough, what I'm going to call HR or human resource bucket.
That's right.
Okay, I'm gonna take over for just a minute. Everybody out there in podcast land, please understand that your church has 3 different budgets. In your mind, you're thinking, oh, well, clearly the financial budget. Oh, yes, There's an amount of dollars that come into the church through giving and tithes and offerings, and then that's a budget. And some leaders will go, oh, I have this great idea. And the senior leaders will say, we haven't, wait for it, budgeted for that. We don't have the money. We're going to have to do that next year. That is totally normal, totally acceptable. That is the financial budget. But then you have a space budget. Ministry is determined by geography. And the geography of your building, it's like, hey, I'm going to do women's ministry on Tuesdays. But the men are like, actually, we're already doing men's ministry on Tuesdays. We can't have both here. You got to pick Wednesdays as we do Tuesdays. Why? Because there's a limit, just like there's a limit financially, there's a limit from a budget standpoint as it relates to space. So you got financial constraints, you have space constraints, but most senior pastors who are hyper visionary leaders, they don't understand there is also an HR budget. There are not just financial resources. There are not just space resources. There are also human resources. And that comes in the category of, number one, staff people, and number two, volunteers. And so all of a sudden, you, Josh, had a volunteer budget, so to speak. You had a number of humans who were willing to be a part of helping move the kingdom forward. And you had too many slots, not enough people. Am I right?
That's right. And what we found was there were three separate groups. There was, like you said, the ones that picked city kids. There was the ones that picked childcare. And then there was the ones that picked both and burned themselves out.
Ouch. Right?
And now I have friends who don't serve on city kids anymore because of that. Because
so in other words, the expectation or the programming that your church had, you actually overshot the budget.
Yeah.
And watch this. Because of that, this is so, I'm all over the place in my mind right now. So, because this is such an important topic. Here's an important piece. You know, the goose, the golden goose. Remember the story of the golden goose? This is such a preschool thing, right? I'm on here with the preschool guru. Well, the story of the golden goose is the farmer comes out. He's like, oh my word, this one chicken lays golden eggs. Next day, another golden egg. And he wants to extract as much as he can. So what does he do? He ends up foolishly lopping the head off of this golden goose, reaching in and trying to grab all of the eggs, thereby killing off the future of a goose laying a golden egg a day. He got greedy. And often leaders in ministry, they're like, okay, we're doing great. We want it all though. And they don't have the self-restraint. They have self-restraint when it comes to the financial budget, because that's pretty easy. But we don't understand that we need to have self-restraint when it comes to a volunteer budget. Interestingly enough, no shame to you, but because of the volume of offerings and the needs that you had from a human resource standpoint, you ended up killing, in a sense, several of your golden geese. They're no longer laying any eggs anymore.
That's right. And we made the childcare part enticing. Hey, we're going to pay you. It's during off hours. You can just go to church and then go home.
And the reason that you did that is that you had an initiative from on high that said, we really have to make sure that we got word and worship going. We're now going to add another layer. This is how church plants work. And we really need to make sure that this thing wins. We're going to really vision cast this one. And part of the vision casting is you get to go to church on Sunday. You get to have some extra money. And so then you incentivized that. Not a problem, but it drew away from your core thing. If people are listening right now, this is the main thing. And a secondary thing was now draining human resources from the main thing. You were now no longer able to get blood flow to the heart and to the lungs because all of the blood flow was going to the legs and the feet. Not a good trade, mind you.
No. And when I found that podcast, I was going through that big challenge. And that same week, my scheduling lead had stepped down. Okay. Because she had said, this is just
This is too much for me.
Yeah. And I was not sure what to do next. I was just thinking through, okay, I got to just solve this. I got to just solve this puzzle here in staff every slot.
Okay, I got to push pause for just a second. In a sense, what happened is that you had what I'm going to call a volunteer bankruptcy moment. You had overspent. No shame on you. This happens all the time. But in a sense, one person was like, I can't do this anymore. And they were a critical key person. Now you're staring down volunteer bankruptcy. You really are now like, how am I going to, I don't know if I have the capacity to be successful now.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And I had just thought, oh, okay, it's my job to fill these. I just got to figure this thing out. And part of that, Josh, was because coming from really huge churches,
okay,
we had all three of those budgets that we could check yes. We had a whole childcare staff. We had childcare rooms stocked up. We had money for it. We had a full-time childcare lead. And here at this church plant, I was trying to act like that. I was trying
very
to
interesting.
do the same thing.
You were, in a sense, operating under a different set of rules. And by the way, those big churches, often they're filling some of those childcare paid roles by full-time staff people.
Mm-hmm.
They have this entirely humongous, overly built human resource bucket, which, by the way, can I just say, that's one of the biggest fall aparts of big churches. Here's why. Serving is a means by which disciples are made. And sometimes what we end up doing is we're like, that's a lot of work to find somebody, to train them, to spend time developing them, to befriend them. I don't have time. What I have is a bunch of money, because a big church may have a bunch of money. So what do? They throw a ton of money at it. They get the need met, but disciples aren't necessarily being made. They have employees, not disciples. Very interesting.
Right. And I had just seen that. So when I came here and was handed this childcare problem, I thought, okay, I've seen this solved. I just need to build a whole childcare staffing team.
Yes.
And when it was failing, I thought, okay, I just need to try.
Yes.
And then hearing episode 37, I went, wait, I could say no. I could just not do childcare.
Okay, so watch this. You had some options now. The first option was recruit intensely for volunteers. Your second option was do what worked at another church, which was hire this out. But you had yet to think about, how about just up and outright saying, no, this is not a thing that I'm going to spend any of my human resource budgets on, whether it's dollars or whether it's people.
Right.
And now, this now comes to this point in the story where you're not just listening to podcast 37. You're not just going through the Lead Volunteers coursework. You actually signed up to do one-on-one coaching with me.
I sure did.
And so now we together, we come up with this, I hear your problem, and we come up with a strategy and a plan for you to talk this through with your leaders. Interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, it sure was. And yeah, it was big going to that elder team and saying, hey, I know that you think you hired me to do childcare as part of my job here. I'm going to start saying no more, and here's why. And one of the big ones there that you and I talked through was for our church family meetings, membership meetings that we have every other month, Sunday nights. And we were trying to staff that childcare. And the rule was, well, you can't use anybody in church membership.
Because we want our church membership there.
Correct. And we're such a small church growing. I mean, now we're at 325, but
Sure.
still a fairly small church. And what I had found, the only way to staff that was putting strangers in those roles.
In other words, you went out to the street and you found human beings who weren't a part of your church, and you paid them a certain amount of money. You paid money to do a background check on them, but they were a hired hand.
Right. Yeah. And most of those found from Baltimore nanny Facebook groups that I just jumped to that group and said,
Now, I want to I'm going to push pause here real quick. To anybody out there who has never been pushed up against a wall and you needed to find childcare things like this, this is exactly what I did. We were unable to do women's ministry on Thursdays and all of these extra things, all that we were doing, every conceivable childcare thing that anybody dreamed up. It just was thrown into our court and said, hey, fine, do childcare for this. Here's the dates. Thank you. And I was like, this is unsustainable. So working with our executive pastor, I went to local universities in our town and I said, hey, your early childhood development. I imagine that there's people that want to have some hours to get money and want to have experience. It was a total bust. I spent tons of time. It wasn't working. So I just like you, I went down all of these different roads, finally to conclude, maybe we as a church shouldn't do this at all.
That's right. So I came forward and said, hey, not for every single thing. There's still going to be some church-wide things I will help with.
I did the same thing. I said the same thing, but I'm going to be very limited, and my first answer is typically going to be no.
Correct. I had said a need needs to meet a whole lot of check marks for me to now. And one of those being it's a church-wide thing. Moms and dads are both there. It's a one-off thing, things like that. But for things like family meeting, for things like women's groups, men's groups, small groups, we can't staff childcare for it because the main thing you hired me for is city kids. And I want to do that really, really well.
And it's now being put at risk.
It is. And I can point to volunteers that had just quit because of this.
I did the same thing. And I said, now, wait a minute. Do you want the heart and the lungs to function well? Or do you want fingers and toes? And they said, we want it all. And I said, you can't have it all right now. It's not realistic. It's unhealthy right now. And so we had to think about the core and supporting the main thing. Your main thing, Josh, is Sunday mornings. Am I right?
Yeah.
That was now being compromised.
It sure was. I was really blessed too because my executive pastor was new here too. He came around at the same time as me, and he was on this same page here really quickly. When I first presented this to him, he said, when you first started to talk, I was not with you, but you've convinced me, and that completely makes sense. And then a point that he brought up too, Josh, that I had thought, oh, Josh would probably like this too, is he kept going back to the word precedent. We're a 5-year-old church. Whatever we do now is going to stick for a long time.
That's right.
And 5 years down the road, we're going to have a hard time getting out of that rut.
That's right.
So what is the precedent that we want to set right now? And right now, it would be painful to say, hey, we're going to stop doing childcare for everything. But it'll be a lot more in 5 years, in 10 years.
Okay, watch this. When women's ministry and men's ministry were built upon the notion that this is just a given.
Right.
And so to take that away, you're really hampering and hamstringing them. But if in fact, in the inception and in the building of men's ministry at its core, at its young age, if they have baked in that it is our responsibility to do childcare, well, that's gonna be a healthy approach. Here's what ended up happening to me, Josh. We shifted it back. Because in the planning that people were undergoing for their ministry, and they were like, oh my word, we got this great idea. And the only way we're going to get our volunteers is if we have childcare during that event. Okay, kids ministry, go do childcare. Thank you. And there was no cost to them. And so moving forward, we said, okay, time out. You can still have childcare, but you're on the hook to provide those people. And they were like, ooh, wait just a minute. I'm not sure if we really need childcare. Okay, good, because we're not so sure either, and it ain't going to be us. And so what you're saying is you don't want to set precedent. You want to set the precedent that it's really that individual ministry's responsibility.
That's right. And I mean, well, we found too, one more piece here. if my volunteers serve childcare for, let's say, women's nights,
Sure.
guess who's not going to women's nights? My city
Those-
kids team.
That's right. That's right. And
Um,
so they're not growing. They're not growing as an individual disciple. They're a worker bee.
Right.
And so how did you come up with, now I get it that you pitched this to your leaders and they bought it. Am I right?
Yes.
Which I bet that was an uncomfortable situation walking in there and saying, hey, I've said yes to a lot of things. And you know what? Doesn't it feel good when you can be the yes guy?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it does. Especially when you're brand new.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to bring bad news. And they're like, I don't think let's keep talking. You have to hold your ground, Josh.
Yeah. Yeah. So I come in here and said, hey, we're going to help anybody who would like to staff their own childcare. I will hand them a list of folks that I recommend.
Sure.
And we will run a ministry safe check. If they send me names, I can run that easy.
Yes, but I'm telling you, watch this. We did the same thing, but we said, hey, guess what, women's ministry? We have a budget for how many times we're going to use Protect My Ministry to do a background check. This is out of your budget because these aren't people that they're not a part of kids ministry. These are brand new people. We'll run it for you, but you're paying for that. Again, we
same thing. You'll pay for that. And if we're going to pay them, I'm not paying them. You are.
That's out of women's ministry's operational budget.
Right. Yeah. Or now there is small groups that now get their own childcare, which is great. And they just all pitch in $15 and pay for it. Great.
For sure. But watch this. In the absence, Josh, of you thinking this through, putting together a presentation and saying, this is not sustainable. Maybe you're the person who didn't listen to podcast episode 37 of Lead Ministry Podcast. You didn't have a coach. You didn't have this. And all of a sudden you're like, well, it's just my job. And then you continue to try to do it. You burn people out. Sunday mornings are now failing. Now you're burning out, burning the candle at both ends. You're not successful. And the whole thing falls apart because you didn't have the wherewithal to stand up on your own 2 feet and listen, it's not about being a jerk and saying no. It's about being a logical staff member that's telling the truth about the totality of the health of this organization.
That's right. Which we're all on the same page about what we want that to be. We want city kids to flourish. All of us do.
And we want word and worship to flourish. And watch carefully. When city kids on Sunday morning doesn't flourish, word and worship is now put into a grave place of danger. Make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
The reason why is because city kids supports the main word and worship.
That's right.
And if all of a sudden word and worship is being put into a compromised situation because now we have no volunteers for Sunday morning and parents are like, I don't feel comfortable leaving my kids there. I'm going to bring my kids into word and worship and they're loud and they're cranky, or moms and dads are like, this isn't even, I don't want to go to church here. Okay, so now the main goal is being compromised because we did childcare on less important things. This comes down to values. What do you really value? And it can't be all things.
No. And what we found, for small groups, they now staff their own.
Yes.
For my small group, we've chosen every week, one or more of us just take turns.
That week off.
Go downstairs and we go watch movies with the kids and we play with toys with the kids and everybody else does small group.
So in other words, that small group, they have autonomy to go, yes, we can do it this way. And by the way, if I were you, Josh, this is like whatever, we're having a little coaching moment on the podcast. If I were you, what I would do is come up with a wonderful sheet of paper that is branded and logoed and all that. And I would say, hey, small group, here are the 6 ways that we have found that you can achieve this on your own. You can either do a $15 thing that everybody's paying some money. We can do go out and hire it yourself. Here are the different pathways that you can do this. So I'm teeing you up for success, but ultimately you're on your own.
That's great. And different groups have found that different things works, which is great. So
that list of 6 things could be a list of 7. It could be a list of 8, that ends up becoming the playbook to let them be successful and not cannibalize your own ministry.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, as we kind of close this off, tell the quick story about you standing up at the all church, your membership thing or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So family meetings, like I had said, I was just hiring Facebook nannies. And every week that we had that, I had moms, I had dads send me texts saying, "Who is that childcare team? I don't recognize them." And what we had found was quality of care was going down. The kids were safe, but the rooms weren't being left clean. Kids were starting to mix with age groups that weren't theirs. I had one sending me texts saying, "Hey, is this kid allowed to have nuts?" when there's a huge sign at the front of the room that says free room. No, nobody can have nuts. And she's like, "Well, she's eating nuts." Like, thank goodness that child can, but no.
Yes, or thank goodness that nobody else in that room had a death allergy, right? So all of a sudden you're like, this isn't working.
Correct. So there's things like that. And what we had found was, okay, we now have so many kids. We've grown. So we're now a membership at that time, 150-ish, 170-ish. Yes. And I had to step back and thought, okay, I just need 6 volunteers 6 times every year to fill these slots. They're in that family meeting.
Yes.
So what I pitched to the elder team is, hey, what if I put out a sign-up list and moms and dads, everybody who's going to utilize childcare for family meetings will take 1 week. And I've always been opposed to that for a Sunday because that's a ministry.
That's
and
right.
If you're required to be serving there, I don't think that you'll be the best minister that you
Agreed.
can be.
As a parenthetical, I am highly opposed to required service.
Yes.
If it's not your gift, it's not your gift. However, this is a different thing. This is filling a hole.
Right. This is, you're going to wash cars and hand out goldfish. That's
Love that.
What this is. So the elder team, most of them said, great, sounds good. One of them said, I don't like this plan, but I'm going to go with all of these guys. And if they say yes, great, do it. And that week I stood up and I have my notes right here. I walked through with the whole church there, the blessing, the challenge, the opportunity. So first off, the blessing, City Kids has grown. City Kids has a whole lot of kids. We went from 17 kids to just 3 weeks back, we had 78 kids. We've grown a lot.
Big growth.
Membership has grown. We've gone from a small church to medium-sized church since 2022. And not just that, City Kids, our quality has increased.
So what you did, you led with the positive. You told them you led with the positive.
Yes. Hey, City Kids, guys, is going really, really well. Parents, you've seen this week in and week out. City Kids is giving your kids, yes, ministry, but really high quality childcare too. That's going really well. But that leads us to the challenge here. Notice I've used the word challenge and not problem.
That's right.
The challenge here is that as City Kids has now increased in quality here, our childcare, the low quality is standing out because all of you are used to City Kids being high quality. And now you walk in and I've been having to staff this. I had said this. You were shocked that I said this from stage. I said, I've been having to staff strangers to watch your kids.
That is a mic drop moment.
Yes. That room got so quiet. I said, right now, next door, I don't know the volunteers that are with your kids. I've background checked them. I've referenced them. I've done everything that I can do. But because we don't have the people there in this church to fill this need, I've had to go outside of this church and there are strangers here. And some of you have seen quality dip And you've complained, rightfully so, to me.
Oh, I love what you did. Watch this. I literally love what you did. And you told me that when you mentioned that you rode out that silence, that you allowed that silence to sink in. You didn't become uncomfortable. You didn't try to reach in and grab it. You just said, I don't even know these people. And then you counted, like I would count at that point, count to 7. And that's going to be a long 7 minutes. But that silence stung for them, didn't it?
It sure did. And it made them lean in and think, how can I help? I don't like that. How can I help? Which led me to the opportunity here. And the phrase that I'd use here, we have an opportunity to partner as gospel family to care for these kids.
That's right.
And I trust you, church, so much more with my own child than some stranger that I've hired off of a nanny Facebook group. So I walked through, hey, I'm going to send out a Google Drive, a Google Sheets document.
Yep.
It's going to have all of the months and all 6 slots. Moms, dads, I want you to sign up for 1 slot. And by the end of that week, Josh, our entire year of childcare for family meetings was fully staffed.
That's outstanding. And you showcased to your elder board that you know how to identify a problem, come up with a plan, and pitch it in a winsome way.
That's right. And the elder that voted no came to me and said, hey, Josh, great job. I was wrong. This plan is great.
That's outstanding. So, and by the way, like the amount of risk that we have bringing in absolute, we don't even know these people. That's a palpable risk.
It is.
And so the interesting thing is that here's the course of events. You came in, you had kids ministry going super strong. Outside people, elders and others said, hey, it's going so strong. We're growing as a church. We need to provide these other ministries. But in order for them to be successful, they made the assumption that the church needed to provide childcare for all of those extraneous things.
And I had never seen anything else.
So you said yes to that.
I went, that's what we do. Yeah, that's how this works.
And so then you went down that road, just like I went down that road, and you found that that is a true story, dead end road. We're not going to be able to support that amount of human beings serving with kids. We need to keep a protection on the main thing, and childcare is not the main thing.
That's right.
And so you started compromising your most important thing Sunday morning to support a less important thing, and the whole thing started to crumble. So
that's right.
You put the main thing in the compromise category. But I just really appreciate how you led that, Josh. And I got to say, it's all good. Big, shall I say, win in the category of Josh Zello, but it's also a win for me, Josh Denhart, because together with the help of the podcast episode 37 with caused you to go, ooh, wait a minute, there may be a different approach. Couple that with, we got to take care of volunteers. That's the lead volunteers win, but also a coaching win where together we strategized a plan, set it forth, and it was a slam dunk and everybody was happy, including your bosses.
It sure was. Yes. And now we're on our 3rd family meeting next month, fully staffed. And only thing I've done is I send out a Saturday night text saying, hey guys, thank you for saying yes. See you at 4.
That's it. That's genius. And so problem solved. Now, here's the interesting thing as we close this off, Josh. And yes, this podcast went a little bit longer than normal, but I think that it is, I have talked to so many people who have been in this corner and been beat up by this. There is a different approach. One thing that's very interesting now is that you, Josh, have the opportunity to put on your lead volunteers goggles and see which of those 6 people that signed up for that family, what do you call it again?
Family meeting.
Family meeting. And how many of those do you have a year?
6
Okay, great.
every other month.
So every other month, 6 times, you have 6 of them, and there's 6 people there. So that's 36 humans who now had an opportunity to serve, and you have an opportunity to go, ooh, wow, which 4? Maybe look at that. There's now 5. 5 of those people have a proclivity toward kids. They got a propensity toward dealing with parents. They know how to troubleshoot something. They're basically inflappable. That is a person now that I would tap on the shoulder and I would ask them to serve in City Kids. It's a testing ground as well as it is serving the family meeting piece. It's a testing ground.
Yep. Yes, it is.
And so that's my challenge to you as we close off the podcast is be looking for who shows up a little bit early, who actually can do a dog and pony show for kids, who knows how to solve problems with kids, who sticks around after and helps clean up, who wants to develop a relationship with you. Find those people, be on the lookout and say to them, you know, you're growing. You have gifts and abilities that you don't know that you have. I, Josh Zello, I have identified that you're that person. I would love to take you to coffee and see if you could be one of our key small group leaders because you're literally this good. And they're like, well, I never knew. I get it, but I've identified that.
Well, and Josh, one more thing in the lead volunteer structure or mechanism.
Yes.
We have this switch, don't ditch. So last month, I had a mom who said, hey, my child's sick. I can't serve. And I said, great, you have that sheet document too. Go and switch with a mom who signed up for a future month, and it was solved.
Brother, okay, let's push pause on this particular podcast. I know we're going to record another one right now. Everybody out there, first of all, let's just say a big thank you to you, Josh. Thank you so much for your faithfulness. Thank you for serving at a church of 17,000, of 1,700, and now a church of 170 that is also now growing. That's such a beautiful story. I think it's absolutely outstanding. Thank you for being a lead volunteers advocate because that's worked for you. Thank you for being one of 12 people that I'm pouring into over 1 year as a ministry coach. It's working, and I'm proud of you.
Thank you, brother. It's been a great joy.
Absolutely. Well, let's push pause on this one, gang. This has been another episode of the Lead Ministry Podcast. What a good story, right? A success story about somebody who, you got it, has now worked themselves out of the pain and the strain of this challenging piece of the expectation that they are going to be a childcare aficionado. I am here not to do childcare. I am here to do ministry. And I'll come up with systems and processes that can help mitigate the need for childcare. All right, gang, we're going to be in this little series here with our friend Josh Zello. We'll be back with you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.